Welcome to the Fearless Happiness Podcast, where we showcase phenomenal individuals who have overcome serious traumas, life obstacles, and challenges to find their own path to fearless happiness. Listen as Max Njist invites guests from all around the world to share their experiences and spread strength, hope, and faith. This is the Fearless Happiness Podcast, and this is Max Njist.
All right, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this world. This is Max from the Fearless Happiness Podcast again, coming back with another amazing special guest. It's true because I met this guy years ago, so wait till you hear his story. So anyway, what I like to do, Kelea, is have you introduce yourself to my audience, like who you are, what it is you do, and then you and I are going to rock and roll.
Yeah, man. So first, Max, really quick, I just want to take a moment to thank you for having me on the podcast. I listened to several episodes before we popped on, and I reminisced about some of the, how we initially met, like all these memories came back from how we initially met and whatnot. But before I dive in, like I would love to just, ask your audience to leave you a review on whatever platform that they're on. I meant to leave you a review before we jumped on. I'll leave one when we jump off. But I respect how much work goes into a podcast like this, the quality of the people that you bring on, your openness and vulnerability about, your recovery and kind of, removing the stigma around that. And so for those that are listening, if there's one thing that I could ask, just go leave you a review. But aside from that, getting into your question, Max, so today, my team and I, we work with, entrepreneurs, high achievers, folks with big goals, big dreams, big aspirations, who are looking to level up in their life, but, they keep getting in their own way, right? They want to play full out, but they struggle with procrastination, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, so on and so forth. And they've read the self-help books, they've done the Tony Robbins seminars, they're thinking positive, they're doing their morning routines, and yet for whatever reason, they are not where they would like to be. And what my team and I do is we help those people break free from procrastination, self-doubt, limiting beliefs, that sort of thing, without any hocus pocus, no woo-woo stuff. It's science-based, research-backed approach that I call integrative neural conditioning. It's 100% guaranteed to work. So that they can finally, break free, grow their business, become that leader, land that deal, and more importantly, so they don't have to, stay awake at night wondering, what if I work my whole life and never become who I'm capable of? But of course, I wasn't always that person, right? Even when you and I first met. So right. We go back, we just rewind maybe about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I was working in a coffee shop for minimum wage. I had done all the things that society tells us to do. I went to school. I mean, I got decent grades. I went to the university, got my bachelor's degree, graduated. And, fast forward, a few years after graduation from the University of Hawaii, I find myself working in a coffee shop for minimum wage, living in my mom's spare bedroom. I've got a 500 credit score. And what ends up happening is around that time, I come home from a barbecue with some friends of mine. And I was living in a house with some roommates, and sitting on the bed is a stack of photographs. And I remember walking in the room and thinking, like, what is that? Did I leave that there? Like, where did that come from? Right. So I walk up to the stack of photographs, I pick it up, and every photograph is ripped in half. There's probably about a dozen or so of these. And when I get to the bottom of the stack, there's a little note that says, "Picture me out of your life." And my girlfriend, who I'd been with for 4.5 years, that was her way of breaking up with me. Pretty savage way to break up with somebody. And I remember thinking to myself, like, we'll figure it out. Like, we'll get back together, right? I mean, like, I didn't really see that coming. And fast forward just 3 weeks from there, I had already moved back in with my mom. Like, I couldn't afford the rent again, so I had moved out of the place with the roommates. I moved back in with my mom, and 3 weeks later, she hasn't answered a phone call. She's not answered a text message. Like, I've reached out to her in every way that I can. I'm starting to realize, like, maybe it really is over this time. And there's this moment where I have this epiphany. I can remember what I was wearing. I could take you to the spot that I was standing when it happened. And I'm kind of going over, what happened in our relationship? Where did things go wrong? And I started just kind of taking this inventory of my life, and I realized, what if it's me? Right? Like I looked at like my job, like my businesses that I had started and failed, like every area of my life where I wasn't happy with the results that I was getting. The only common denominator in all of those things was me. And so that's this moment where I realize, like it was a tough pill to swallow initially, because I grew up in an environment where we blame everybody but ourselves. It's everybody but us, and that's so it seems so much easier to do. Um, but that's this moment where I realized too, I was like, well, if it is me, I can do something about me. I can work on me. Like I can't change my mom, change my upbringing, change the economy, change the Republicans, change the Democrats, change change the marketplace, change my compensation plan, change my boss, change my coworkers, but I could change me. So what if I just started there? And that set me down a road of personal development, self-discovery, self-mastery in the long run. That radically changed my life. The next business I got my hands on, I took that to over 140 million in sales before I sold that company in 2024. And the rest is kind of history. So hopefully that gets us caught up to where we are now.
Yeah.
And I met you right around that same time, like when I was going through all of that, that whole discovery process. But go ahead.
And it's funny because a lot of us were at that time when we met, we're kind of going through these phases, right? And it's interesting that you talk about, right? Like I come from that background, even my addiction, I was blaming everybody. It's not my fault. What do you mean? It's God's fault. It's my dad's fault. My dad was passed away when what I mean? It's my mom's fault. It's everybody's fault but mine. But what you're talking about is true, right? There is a lot of times where imposter syndrome kicks in. So this is going to be an interesting conversation, right? To help people, or at least give them a taste of what you do, so that, because I know for myself, I go through that all the time, right? Even though I have the drive and the focus to keep going and not quit on myself, I run into those brick walls where it's like, damn, what am I doing wrong? Here I go again, right? And then I get into a little bit of the poor me's, the pity party, and right.
Mm-hmm.
But, like you, I've had those moments where I had to look in the mirror and go, dude, the only one that I see is you, right? Your fault. And, but that's a good thing if you know how to switch that flip and go, okay, it is me, right? Now I'm going to learn, right? Because I even talk about what I like to talk, even in my recovery, right? The failures. Well, the ultimate failure is if I pick up a drink or a drug again, right? Like you and I wouldn't be sitting here. But what I mean by that is like working on something where I totally hit, fall on my face. Oh, that stung. That hurts, right? But guys like you have taught me, right, in my personal development, is to go, okay, what did you learn from that? So that
Right.
you can gain some knowledge and know not to do that again, right? But I'm a little bit me, I'm stubborn. Sometimes I have to do the same thing over and over again, right? To go, yeah, that didn't work. So in your journey, right? Because like you said, when we met 12, 13 years ago, right? You were like, I was listening to you and I'm going, okay, Keala has figured it out, right? Because right, I was still, figuring it out. And I think we all figure it out along the way as we go. But you, like, when I remember you, I mean, that's the thing that sticks out. You were like focused, like, I'm going to change this. And when you see me again, I'm not going to be the same guy. Right. And you have changed over the years. And I can attest to that because I see him on Facebook. I could just see what he's done with his life and how he's helped others. And that's the main focus, I think. Not the main focus, but the main thing I think why you're so successful is because you pour into others. Like you teach people what you did to become successful. And now you're finding another avenue to do that, to help guys like me get to the next level, so that I don't just come back in a year and go, Keala, man, I'm stuck again. How do I change this? Right. Because it is for me. I'm speaking my experience, right? Procrastination, self-doubt, all that stuff that pops into our brains. But so I want you to talk about that. Like you were very successful in your business that you just sold, because I've watched you for years. Like I'd always check in, right? And I'd always see, dang, man, he's kicking some ass. Like I love it, right?
Thanks.
But you work hard at it. You've had those moments where you've fallen down, you brushed yourself off and you said, I'm going to keep going. So into this new, like we go through stuff, like you said, the braid, that was pretty brutal, bro. Like I hear that when I hear you, I'm like, damn, some chick did that to me. I'm not even a caller. Like I get the hint. I'm done. Because
Her and
I
I,
know that this big, right?
to update you on that story, her and I are still together today. This is we made 20 years this year in 2025. So we eventually, we eventually band-aided that relationship. But again, the result of like me working on me, you know,
Right.
and not blaming the results of our relationship on her, which is like so easy to do. Like,
Right.
a question would be often like a question I would have, that I pose to your audience is how many people does it take to change a relationship? And most people say well, two. No, it takes one. It takes one person to change the relationship. It takes two to make it work, but it only takes one to make a commitment to change that relationship for good. And oftentimes that has less to do with committing to a relationship and more to do with committing to ourselves, like our authentic selves, and showing up authentically in that relationship. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, man. So go ahead.
No, that's okay, right? And that's something important that you talk about, being our authentic selves. Because if you see the news and the world's crazy today, like I was just like, I don't like to do it, but I happened to, a notification on Facebook came up, and of course, all the things that are going on in LA are popping up, and I'm like, damn, I got to put this down because I'm about ready to have a killer conversation with my friend Kiala over here. But you get what I'm saying, though. Like, and so what would you tell us as the audience, right? Okay, we're at that place, Kiala. We need your help. I realize that, when I'm pointing the finger, there's three pointing back at me. How do I begin to change myself, and how do I work on myself? Because I understand that now, years later, right? That there is a selfishness that you have to have in order to grow as a human being, right? You got to focus on yourself, because I say it on the podcast. If you've heard the other episodes, it's the whole oxygen on the airplane, right? If it drops, they tell you got to put it on first, or you're not. I won't be able to help my friend Kiala, who's over here, needs help, right? If I don't do it, I'm going to pass that on his lap, and he's going to be like, dude, what are you doing? Right. But that's, I guess, the question I want to ask is like, how does someone start when they realize they're done with the finger pointing, and it's the person looking back at them in the mirror?
Well, I mean, I think much like the recovery journey, right? Like step one is admit that there's a problem, right? So you've nailed it already. Like at the point in which somebody says, "Hey, like there's that conversation that we just had briefly. Like I'm on a mission in my life to like take that I'm on a mission in my life to take that conversation to every household across the globe, in every language and every culture, because for me, I think that that's the most empowering conversation that any human being on this earth can have, is to sit down and say to ourselves, I'm not happy with what's going on in my life. I'm not satisfied or fulfilled with this result. And how am I the one that's creating it? And then the whole world can begin to change, you know?
Right.
But as long as we blame something else out there, we're blaming, our upbringing, our parents, the economy, the Republicans, the Democrats, the marketplace, our upline, our downline, or whatever it is, in various opportunities that people are in. As long as we're blaming something else out there, then it's up to something else to change in order for us to have what we want. And we have no control over that. That's essentially means that the only way for me to have what I want is to get lucky. If that changes, if my upbringing, like you can't change your upbringing, you know what I mean?
You can't go back in time,
So,
right?
yeah. So it's like, well, if that didn't happen, then I would have what I want. It's like, no, it's like, I would acknowledge that maybe we're not necessary. Maybe we're not necessarily responsible for everything that's happened to us in our life, but we are at the very minimum responsible for how we respond to what's happened to us in our life, right? That we don't spend our lives like, blaming others or blaming the past and then perpetuating the past and making the past now our future.
Right.
So beyond the place of accepting, okay, what if I'm the fulcrum of my life experience? What if I'm the person, I'm the reason, right? And it's not, I think there's a distinction between fault and responsibility. It's not like fault is to essentially say that, it's a negative thing. But responsibility is to acknowledge that there's both negatives and positives that come with it, right? Like that I am the creator of my life in both the benefits and the drawbacks that I've seen in my life. So at that point, I think the real question becomes then, well, what is the thinking? Like, what is the underlying unconscious programming that is creating the way that I show up in my life today, that's creating my reality? Because if we look at our reality, our results as an example, right? So if we want to know what are we committed to, then just look around. The money that we have in the bank account, the career that we have, the relationship that we have with others, with ourselves, with our family, with our spouse, with our coworkers, with our boss, the car we drive, the house we live in, whatever it is. If we just look at it, we take an inventory of our current results. That is the most fair and objective way to come to terms with what we've been committed to up until this point. Right? So in our company, we have a saying: results are often harsh, but always fair. Right? So it's impossible to say that I'm committed to anything else that I haven't yet achieved, if that makes sense. Right? Like I can't be committed to that. I can say that I would like that, I would love that, I wish for that, I hope for that, but if I don't have it, I'm clearly not committed to it. So if we start with our results, and then we take a step back and say, okay, well, this is what I've been committed to up until this point. Regardless of what I say I'm committed to, this must be what I've been committed to up until this point. And our results are then therefore going to be a byproduct of our actions. Our actions are always the byproduct of our thinking. And our thinking, therefore, becomes the initial question, right? What is the thinking that has me creating the life that I have today? So oftentimes we say, we hear that term mindset thrown around, like, it's thrown around in lots of different arenas. It means a lot of different things. In our company, when we talk about mindset, we really boil it down to two words: mind, brain, thinking. Set, automatic. Like when you set a clock, it automatically tells time. You don't have to set it the next minute and the minute after that. So when we're talking about mindset, we're talking about our automated way of thinking. Now, science shows us that 95% of that thinking is unconscious. So immediately we know that 95% of what's creating my result is an unconscious programming, an unconscious way of or pattern of thinking that becomes my default actions and therefore my default response. So the question becomes, well, what is it in there? What do I change there? And how do I change it so that I stop living a life by default and start living a life by design? And the reality is, in my experience, that there's much more to unraveling that ball of yarn than, going to rah motivational events and standing on a chair and playing loud music and beating your chest just for, the excitement to wear off by Wednesday afternoon when you pull in the garage.
By the time you get home that night.
Yeah, it's just a much deeper discovery process, and that's what we take people through in our classes. Is that and when I talk about integrative neural conditioning, what we're ultimately doing is, when you understand the brain is an adaptation tool. So it adapts to survive.
Yes.
And which means, and we know this from cognitive psychology, from 0 to about 7 years old, the brain operates at theta brainwave, which essentially is the same as hypnosis. So in other words, from 0 to 7 years old, we don't have a firewall through which that we, can filter out and rationalize the world around us. So everything soaks in. That's why we say as kids that, like, oh, their mind is like a sponge. It's because everything gets in. Right. And they don't have a way to rationalize and say, like, oh, well, mom left because, her and dad don't get along anymore. It's like, no, mom left so she must not love me. I must not be lovable. Like, these are the stories that we start making up about ourselves.
Yep.
Because the brain is an adaptation tool, it, our amygdala will tag memories as good or bad. And then it's stored with valency in our hippocampus. And then whenever something in our future reminds us of that old pain, that old trauma, that old problem, the amygdala fires up sets off the warning signals and, lights us up and says, this is just like that. And that's how we get triggered. But when you break that down, what that means is that our past that we were unconsciously creating becomes our unconscious automated future, because we're responding to even though we live in the present, we bring all of our past to the present. And when we bring our past to the present moment, we create a future that matches our destiny matches our history. Our life is therefore default rather than by design. Does any of this make sense? I don't know. I could be rambling at this point.
No. Well, for me, it makes sense, right? Because I've had a guest on here that talks about that 95% is automatic. It's just the unconscious part of the brain. And he talked about, like the only thing to change that is repetition. Like building a new operating system, basically, is what he said. And I love that, because you're right? Because we talked about, I'm almost 22 years clean and sober, right? But there's still things, right, when I see certain triggers that bring me back to oh my God, I'm going to go to jail, right? If I see a cop behind me or whatever, right? But that was stuff that I did to myself. And that's part of that brain you're talking about that's been with us since the beginning of time, that reticular activating system, right? Which it's fight or flight, right? So as our brains have evolved, right? You're right. Like all those things we've learned as kids, whether it's good or bad, get imprinted in our subconscious mind. And like you said, things come up from years ago and you're like, why is that happening, man? Like, I'm 57 years old. I shouldn't be tripping out on that shit. Excuse my language, everybody. But hey, but it's true though. So that brings me to this question, right? Because that does make sense, right? So I believe that living in our authentic self, like you talk about, is living in the present and not letting that stuff drive us, right? Because I've read books like Napoleon Hill, right? Like all those guys that talk about how they train their subconscious mind to bring things like, what does he say? Thoughts become things, right? And it's true. How many times have you done this, Keala, where you're in a bad place, right? And you're just giving off bad vibes and bad things just keep happening. And you're like, why me? Right? Like I've done that too. But also when I'm in the flow, like say I'm in flow and good things are happening, when I've stopped to pause it and reflect on it, it's because I'm putting out good energy. You know what I mean? Like when I'm helping someone in recovery get sober and I just pour into them, good things seem to happen because I'm getting outside of myself and I'm trying to help someone who's in a bad place, right? But when I'm like, okay, I'm getting older. I told you, right? So I got 2 acres, right? And I'm doing the yard work. And about halfway through the day, my body's going, you're a dick because now you're going to suffer for this, right? And it's weird how the brain just starts going to, oh, this hurts, that hurts, this hurts, that, all of a sudden my whole body hurts. And it's not because I'm doing the work. It's because I'm putting it out there. So my body's going, yeah, we're going to let you know it hurts. Right. So how do you help people change that brain? Like, what are some of the things that you teach? Right. Because I know the audience like me, I'm sitting here listening to you going, God, that makes sense. That makes sense. Like, how do we change this though? Okay. So Keala, tell us, what are some of the things that you have gone through that you realized you had to change, and how do you help others change their thinking?
Yeah, I love that question. So, and the reality is, I mean, there's far more to it than I can, share in a single podcast, of course. But
right,
let's break some of this down. So, one of the things that you mentioned is that our unconscious mind is responsible for about 95% of all of our decision making, right? So, the majority of our thinking is unconscious. One of the things that you mentioned is that the only way to change that is through repetition. Actually, because the brain is an adaptation tool, so repetition is one way to make change. And when we use when we're talking about changing our behaviors, okay, so when we say, I want to change my outcomes, what you're ultimately saying is, well, I need to then change my behaviors, okay, because behaviors create outcomes. Now let's take that one step back. What you're really then saying is, well, I need to change my thinking, because our thinking creates our behaviors, which creates our outcomes.
Right.
So if we're going to change our thinking, and the majority of our thinking is unconscious, then we've got to understand the organ, the brain, that we're talking about making a change to. So repetition is one way that works. Okay. And it works in remyelinating the brain. So when we're talking about brain change, we're actually talking about remyelination. Let me break this down really quickly for your listeners. I don't want to get too heavy on the science. I don't want anybody's eyes to roll back in their head and boredom, right? But we hear a lot about, like, neuroscience, neurology, neuroplasticity, these sorts of things.
Yes.
So our brain is comprised of a bunch of neurological connections, neural pathways in the brain that have been habituated over time. In other words, our brain, because it's a shortcut mechanism, right? That's why we have an unconscious, because if we had to consciously process everything going on in our life, we would get nothing done. That would take all of our computing power. So our brain creates these shortcuts, neural pathways, that allow us to make, take in a lot of information and create responses based on the default neural pathways of the brain. And so those neural pathways, the more that we use them, the more myelinated they become. It's like a layer of protein. So think about like your neural pathways as a connection of cables.
Right.
And the myelination is like, when you wrap, electrical cords so that you insulate them, and the electricity, that pulse, that signal runs through that electrical cord more seamlessly, more efficiently. That's what myelination does. When we're talking about creating brain change, we're talking about remyelinating the brain. So we've got to break down the existing myelination, create neuroplasticity, which means that the brain is open and malleable to change. And now we've got to create new neural pathways. Now, one way to do that is repetition. Repetition is something like an affirmation, as an example.
Right.
Now, most of us have done affirmations before, and then, we give up on the affirmation long before we get the result, because, at the end of the day, we feel like we're lying to ourselves. And here's just so we're clear, folks, that's because we are lying to ourselves. I just want to make that clear, right? Because if we already believe that about ourselves, then we wouldn't need the affirmation in the first place. So you're lying to yourself until you believe it. That's one way to do it. Now, the reality is, though, that because the results take so long, most people will give up on that strategy long before they get the result. A different way, the thing that we focus on in our company is real life experiences. So you can probably think of like real life experiences. Every listener here can probably think of a real life experience, like that real life experience that I shared when I first shared, like that moment when I picked up those photographs off that bed. There is a deep emotional experience that takes place, and my life is never the same since.
Right.
Right. And so because our brain, like my brain, basically, like I experienced such hurt in that moment that my brain needed to figure out, okay, how do we prevent this hurt from happening again? And because the brain's an adaptation tool, and there's such a strong emotional charge attached to that experience, the brain is now rapidly engaged in change versus repetition, right? So if I stand in front of my mirror and I'm, saying affirmations, 100 times a day, can it work? Yes, it can work. Everybody who's ever done it will say, "Oh, you got to add that, emotional charge to it. Like you got to say it like you believe it. You got to ingrain it in your body."
Right.
And that's obviously going to enhance its ability to work. What we focus on is taking our clients through a set of experiences that create these, emotional. And when I say emotional, some people are going to hear this and go like, "Oh my God, they're going to have me like, laying in a puddle of my own tears." No, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But we do take people through a set of, so like if you come to our 3-day class online, it's called Genesis. It's the introductory class that we do. We 100% guarantee results. We give you double your money back if you feel like you didn't get an absolute mind-blowing breakthrough that catapults your life and business forward. We pay you back double what you paid to come to the class. The only company in the world that I know that stands behind their product that strongly. When you come to that class, though, it's not a lecture. The facilitator is not standing up in front of the room just saying like, "Here's the concept, take notes." Like we don't want people taking notes. Instead, what happens is you break into small groups, you play games, you have these, interactions. We take you through closed eye exercises. You're standing in front of your computer at home on screen, and you might be, dancing a bit, or you're acting something out, or whatever it might be that comes to you in some of these exercises. In other words, you're having these real life, full body, visceral experiences And as those experiences are happening, your brain is learning. And then as we deliver the lesson that comes at the end of that experience, your brain goes, oh, that's that's what I stand to gain from this. And it starts adapting very quickly. Typically, when people leave that class, like they go into their life and they immediately will start seeing that they're showing up differently. They're having tough conversations. They're moving forward. They're acting on things that they used to put behind them. Almost one of the most common things we hear from people is like, that month that I took that Genesis class, that was my highest earning month ever. If they're in any type of a sales job or a business, they're like, that was like a breakthrough month for me. Like, yeah, because you had a breakthrough, right?
Right.
And then in our advanced classes, which are, retreats, in-person retreats, it's basically that on steroids. Like now, you're in an environment, we're able to, really at that point, like you're not at home, you don't turn off your computer and go back into your home environment. At that point, like when you come to one of the retreats, you wake up in that environment, you go to sleep in that environment, you're having breakfast with people that are in the class with you, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people in the class with you. You're going back to your cabin or a hotel room, and like you're talking with other people in the class about your discoveries and your breakthroughs. And what happens is, because of that, extended period of time, then those changes happen even more rapidly, right? So integrative neural conditioning is ultimately a way of programming the mind using the way that the mind is automatically programmed to begin with. So as human beings, what we know is that our unconscious programming is largely the result of some sort of highly intense emotional experience that we had often in our early childhood between 0 and 7. When we have that emotionally charged experience, in order to try to understand the world and protect ourselves, we will create a belief about ourself or the world around us. And from that moment forward, that belief essentially begins to run our life in whenever that same emotion is triggered, right? So if mom, like for me, when my parents split, I didn't know until I started doing this work years later that I made up this story that because my parents split, my dad didn't really see us for the first couple of years. And I was 13 going into that. Like, I didn't know that I had made up this story that I'm not lovable. But I could see in my life that like the evidence was there, because everybody who tried to love me, I pushed away from 13 until I was 23, 25, 26, when I started discovering this stuff. So for 13 years, everybody who tried to love me, I pushed away. But if you treated me horribly, I chased after you. I wanted to be around you.
Right.
Because you validated the story. You were safe, So the same way that we create that programming in childhood, we take people through that, a very similar process to reprogram them in their adulthood, but they get to choose the programs this time. They get to choose, like, what is my operating system going to be? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
That does, right? Because in my studies as a substance abuse counselor, right? Like, I can't get into stuff like that because I'll get the look like, what the hell? I have no idea what you're talking about, right? But I use neuroscience, right? And I said, you want to start thinking. So, like, I start at the basic level. Like, I help them by going, okay, you want to change the way you see the world and yourself, start doing a gratitude journal, right? And then I get into why that works. And they'll be like, why? I got to go, because what our brain will do, will build new neural pathways in your brain the more you're doing the gratitude journal, because neuroscience, right, says if you're
and the more you feel the gratitude,
right?
Like, it's not just the writing it down, it's like the actual emotion of it. But keep going.
Right, because what your brain tells you, like when you're actually putting something on paper and reading it, right, and you're writing it, if you do that first thing in the morning, like I've been doing for the last 21 years, and then at night it's the last thing I do, like my depression doesn't kick in at all. Like, I've been off medication for almost 5 years, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't get into bouts of depression anymore since I started doing stuff like that. And or I kept doing it even through the things I talked to you about before the podcast started, right? Like, I kept doing the gratitude journal during my difficult times in my recovery, right? With family, loss of family members and stuff like that. But I took this class from a guy, it's called My Steady Mind, right? And it's all about calming our brains so that we can show up in the world and respond in a lot better ways, right? If we're in, like where I work, in stressful situations, where like not getting my cell phone the day one, I'm going to freak out and, I'm going to leave, right? And you know what I'm talking about. But he actually shows a video in the training we did of those pathways coming back together and rebuilding, like you talked about.
Mm.
But I know, like, listening, because I know there's levels to this, right? And like for myself, like I'm definitely interested in learning more about this stuff. But you talked to a couple about like your childhood, right? Went through a divorce, a lot of similarities, right? Like that's the story I told myself for years. But see, my and people don't know this, my solution was to get high, right? Like, okay, that so I don't want to feel that I'm unlovable, so I'm going to get high so I don't have to feel that stuff, right? A part of it. Like if I did the work like I've done, I realized that's what I was telling myself. But so then you get the torn pictures from the girlfriend, right? And then, like I've talked about in the beginning, right? You ran a very successful business, and I've watched you do it over the years online. Like, what were those moments, even when you were very successful, when you said, there's more to this life than just what I'm doing now, right? Like, because you sold your business, now you're helping people, like you said, high achievers expand their minds and become better, right? Because, like, I listen to a lot of well, not a lot, but like the Ed Milet's, the Andy Frisella's, right? And Andy's a little brutal, but I love it, right? But if you listen to a story, I love what he talks about. Is like, look, I was in business. My first 10 years, I only made 50 grand. 10 years of business, right? And he was sleeping, like he talks about in his first shop, right? He slept in the back on a pea stained mattress that he bought from the Goodwill, right? And you think about that, and he's like, wow, man, that guy's pretty dedicated. But I think he knew what you knew, right? He was conditioning himself for success, because despite all the stuff that would create those stories, look at him now, right? Look at you now. Like, I feel honored to have you on here because I've seen you go through some of the stuff, like when I first met you. And then I'm like, man, he's killing it, right? But at the same time, I think we're all killing it since that time because we followed our passions, right? We're trying to help people. But what was the most recent challenge that made you decide to, like, this stuff makes sense, but I know there's more for me out there? Like, what was that moment where you said, I'm going to help people with this and teach this stuff?
Man, that's a deep question. Okay. So when in 2010, when I had that whole experience with my girlfriend, that's when I started down this path. You and I met a couple of years after that, so we're right around that time or so. And I was on this kind of path of self-discovery, trying to figure out, like, where am I going to apply this? How do I, now that I'm learning this stuff and I'm changing myself, like, from the inside out, how am I going to apply it? Where do I go with this? And what ended up happening is, like, that I discovered affiliate marketing, and I became just really good at affiliate marketing. And I can talk a little bit about, I think something that might be really helpful for your audience is something that I call the power code. So I hope I remember to come back to that, but because that's what helped me find affiliate marketing. So I got really good at affiliate marketing. And by default, and for those who don't know, affiliate marketing means, like, I sell somebody else's product, they pay me a commission for selling it. So I run ads on Facebook, Google, YouTube, whatever. And, those ads link back to their product. When they make a sale, I get a commission. Just like when you refer somebody to, Grubhub or DoorDash or whatever your favorite apps are. So that's how I make my first $1 million, is being an affiliate marketer. What ends up happening in the process of that is I end up on leaderboards in different contests. Like, I ended up just making a name for myself in that industry. And people kept coming to me and asking me, okay, so how do you, how are you doing what you're doing? How, like, can you show me how to, run Facebook ads? Can you show me how to build an email list and all these different things? So what ends up happening is I kind of organically start launching courses, teaching people what I'm doing. In 2016, I partnered with a friend of mine, and I launch. kind of just organically turns into a coaching business. We decide to launch it as a coaching business. So now we're going to, teach people how to become affiliate marketers. And this is long before like coaching businesses are super popular now, but in 2016, they weren't nearly what they are today, right? We launched that. We go from 0 to $1 million a month in 4 months. So we went to just shy of $20 million in revenue our very first year. So this is November of 2016. We launched right after Thanksgiving. By the end of 2017, we had done just shy of $20 million in revenue. I've got like 60 something employees, yada, yada. My business partner and I in 2018 started having a falling out. And eventually, after an 8-month legal battle, I'm giving you the abbreviated version.
Right.
This is a war story in and of itself. But after an 8-month legal battle, I end up buying him out. As part of the buyout agreement, I had to agree to give up the brand that we were operating under. So I had to rebrand the entire company. So we're going into 2019 now. I'm rebranding the entire company, which for those who don't know, I mean, that's a lot like starting over again. It's a lot like starting over from scratch. So I go from 60 people on my team to 12. I had to let go of a lot of people. Most months in 2019, we lost money. I had spent everything that I had left to buy out the business partner. And I'm not allowed to say how much I bought him out for, but I can tell you there was 2 commas in the check I wrote. So I'm here in the middle of 2019, and I'm going through this, what feels like its own special form of hell, to be honest. And there's this moment, I'm sitting on my back patio at the time, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this all for? Like, what am I doing this for? Because I already knew at that point that I'd made enough money that I knew that money wasn't going to make me happier. Like, there was no amount of money that was ever going to be added to my bank account that was going to make me happier. Now, I know people hear that, and if they've never experienced that, they think, look, well, fuck, I hope you get to prove it to me. You know what I mean? But Jim Carrey has that famous talk where he says, like, I wish I could give everybody a check for $10 million so they would realize that it's not that they're missing.
Right. I love
that.
I
had already had that, right? So I'm thinking, like, if I'm going to deal with all this, if I'm going to go through all of this, what I've been going through for, at this point, like over a year now, there's got to be something more to it than this. And so I started asking myself, like, what's something that I can do in the world that's going to actually matter? And I was doing these classes, what I'm talking about now, I was doing them behind the scenes, but we did them on a one-off basis. We did them as needed. I knew when I was coaching people that what I'm teaching them, I know for a fact it works, right? The reason that they won't get a result is that they won't do the thing that I'm teaching them that works. Like, like we know going to the gym and eating right works.
Right.
We all know that it works. Most people don't go to the gym and eat right. That has nothing to do with the fact that, working out doesn't work.
Right.
So I knew that, like, what I really needed to do to change my clients' lives was to help them make these major shifts, in their subconscious programming. And so we were doing these classes, as one-offs. And so 2019, I'm asking myself, well, what am I doing this for? What is this all for? And then that turns into, well, what's something that I can do in the world that's going to really make a difference and really matter? And I looked around and I noticed that all of our clients that had made over $250,000 in a year, all of them had done my mindset classes. And more importantly than that, though, even the ones who didn't go out and become some prolific affiliate marketer, when they did our classes, they were happier, more fulfilled, better marriages, better relationships with their kids. Like, every area of their life was better. And they would constantly report back to us, like, how grateful they were. So around the same time is when, Elon's talking about, human beings going to Mars and all this. And so I ask myself, okay, well, what's something that's so good? Like, what's something that I can build in the world that's good enough to leave Earth, as we become like this galactic species? And I kind of figure that no matter where humans go in the universe, humans go. Yep. Which means that we're going to continue to ask ourselves the common human questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I here to do? What really matters most? Why don't I feel fulfilled? What's going to be the most fulfilling thing for me? Why do I feel like I'm out of alignment? Like, all these questions that make us so uniquely human. Right. And I know that the work that I do now, I want to be clear about this. It does not answer those questions. It helps you find your answer to those questions. And I can't think of anything more fulfilling than that. Because what I see, on the other end of our classes is like people that come out the other end and they love themselves more wholly. And they love themselves for who they are, not some fantasy about what they think that they ought to be. We live in a world that likes to tell us that we're supposed to be always kind, never cruel, always happy, never sad, always peaceful, never wrathful, always honest, never dishonest, always positive, never negative. That's the common rhetoric in our world, that to be successful, to be worthy, to be enlightened, is to live a one-sided life. But in 10,000 years of written human history, Max, I can't find one single person who's ever done it. 10,000 years of history, I can't find one who's ever lived a one-sided life. Not even the deities, not even the gods. We talk about, like, and I'm not saying this to discredit religion, just so we're clear, right?
Right.
But in all the stories of the gods and the deities, there are stories of the wrath, fury, and, judgment of the gods.
Right.
So if even the gods cannot live a one-sided life all of the time, why should we think that we're supposed to? But because we have this idea that we're supposed to live this one-sided life, what often happens is we create our own prison. We create our own special form of hell because we think that something's wrong with us, that we're broken, that we haven't quite figured it out, that, we haven't quite gotten it right. When the reality is that being whole is what brings you, close to holy, right? How can you love yourself if you're busy disowning one half of yourself?
Right.
And so when people come through the other side of our classes, not only do they like reprogram their mind, what they realize is all of the trauma, all of the pain, all of the anguish, all of the, broken hearts, all of the suffering, it all in some way, shape, or form served them. And when they can see that the greatest challenges that they've ever been through in life also serve them in their life, what happens is they become fearless, become, unfuckwithable, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Because when you see that, when you know it, when you embrace it, like, and not you've heard it in a lecture, not I wrote it on a whiteboard and talked to you about it. No, like when you experience it and it's in your bones, and without with it like the back of your hand, it with clarity and certainty, right? That everything that's challenged you up in your life has also served you. What happens is you begin to approach life from a place of, well, what do I have to be afraid of now? Because anything that comes my way, I also know there's a hidden blessing in the apparent curse. I know that there's a seed of equal or greater opportunity in every obstacle. And so instead of running from life, we embrace life. Instead of running from challenges, we embrace the suck. And when you can understand, like when you can embrace both sides of life, life becomes fulfilling. It's become something that you run towards, not run from,
Exactly.
So I just want to spend my rest of my life helping people do that.
See, I love it. I knew this episode was going to be like the shit. Let's just say, right? I knew Keala was going to bring it. It's been a while, but I have seen, if you could say that, I've seen his growth from the time I met him to now, right? Like the things he's gone through. But even in his affiliate marketing business, he was always pouring into people. If you watch his ads and stuff, it's about pouring into people and helping them become better. And right. And you and I will have a conversation afterwards because, there's some growth that needs to happen on my side, like we talked about a little bit. But thank you for sharing that, Keala. And like I said, I knew this was going to be a great interview and a great conversation. You brought it. So now I get to ask you some of the questions that I love to ask, right? And you said one of them, but fearless, right? Mm-hmm. What does fearless mean to you today? And how does that show up in your life on a daily basis?
Fearless, and I love it. And I've heard you ask this question in your podcast, right? And I purposely wanted to come to this conversation without a scripted answer and to just be present in like what unfolded in our conversation. But to share to go back on what like just organically came up in our conversation, for me, fearlessness is seeing that both sides of life are necessary. That if you want to be the hero, some people are going to see you as the villain. If you take the credit, some people are going to give you the blame. You know, if you want triumph, you have to go through challenge. Like you don't get to have one side without the other. And so fearlessness for me is embracing both sides of life with equal indifference. In other words, I'm not attached to being the hero, and I don't care that some people are going to call me the villain. I don't need the credit, and I don't care that some people are going to give me the blame. I'm not looking, for success or failure. I'm just a man on a mission to help others find their mission, meaning, and purpose in life. And I get that it's going to come with both sides. And I embrace both sides because both sides make me better. That's living a fearless life.
I love it. You got to have both, right? If there's one or the other, it'd be pretty boring if you ask me. Well, I don't know if it
Wouldn't
was,
it?
yeah, if it was shitty all the time, you'd be pretty pissed off. So, you know what I mean? But
Wouldn't it?
I agree. I'm with you 100%, right? I think the things that like we have gone through, like say in our lives that we're at, like they would say at our worst, right? Or what shaped us. You said it. Let's say it, right? Those sucks that we embraced have made us who we are today, right? And
Right.
everybody's different, right? But we all got the suck to embrace because I say it all the time. Lean in, right? Lean into the suck and learn from it. But I love it.
I'll share this with you really quick. I saw interview recently. I thought it was beautiful. Jensen Huang. Do you know Jensen Huang? He's the CEO of NVIDIA. So for listeners who don't know, NVIDIA is, they basically make the microchips that are in everything on planet Earth, it seems like at this point. Multi-billion-dollar company. He's a billionaire, one of the fastest growing companies in history. But he's being interviewed at Stanford University. And he shares this, and I'm going to subquote it here because I don't remember exactly what he said. But he says in the interview, you Stanford graduates, you have high expectations. We have Stanford graduates at NVIDIA. And you should have high expectations. You went to one of the best schools. You have some of the best curriculum. You're surrounded by some of the best minds. And at the same time, the challenge with high expectations is that you tend to have low resilience. And unfortunately, low resilience is really important when it comes to success. So he says, and resilience and character are something that you build through suffering. So this might sound, contradictory, but I wish upon you ample pain and suffering so that you can learn resilience. And I thought that was just beautiful because like so often we're in a world that wants to tell us that we can have one side without the other. And the reality is that we don't get to have one side without the other. Nobody who's ever been to the top of Everest did it without the climb. Right. And so, winning at an incredible level, like becoming the greatness of who we are born on this earth to be, it is only remarkable because of what we have to overcome to get there. Because without challenge, there is no such thing as triumph. And so if we want to live a triumphant life, we have to embrace the challenges along the way. One of my mantras recently, and this is relatively recent, like literally in the last 30 days, I started saying to myself, especially when I run into challenges, I say, this must be what's best for me because it's what's happening. In other words, just because it's happening, this must be what's best for me. This is on the way, not in the way, And oftentimes when it feels like the road is being ripped out from underneath us, it's really the road rising up to meet us and carry us on our mission. But so often we judge the road rather than love the road. And then we hate the journey rather than embrace the journey. And then we create our own version of hell right here on earth.
I hope you let that sink in, everyone. That was fire right there. That's, man, gave me goosebumps, brother. But you know what? But I remember like when we first talked and I was sharing like part of my addiction story, you were like, holy shit, man. You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't share that to get the holy shits. It was just like, that was what we were doing at the time, sharing like what we had gone through. But I think about those times now and I don't regret it, right? Because it's changed me into the man who I am today, right? I don't ever have to go back to that to get another lesson. I don't need to, right? But, and just like you with your lessons, like with the girlfriend, your parents splitting up and your business part, all those challenges, right? I think people like you, and thank you for sharing your story here, right? Like that's what makes you guys great. is because you didn't shy away from those challenges. Like you didn't go, or like the ostrich, right? You didn't stick your head in the dirt and go, okay, I'm going to wait here for a minute. When I pop it back up, everything's going to be cool. And then I can be on my merry way, right? Kial is an example of one of those guys who said, okay, bring it, right? I may not like it, but I'm going to learn from it. And then I'm going to turn around and try to help people so they don't have to experience it. Or if they do, let them know it's going to be okay because it's part of the journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And I love that, man. I knew this was going to be an awesome interview, bro. Like I knew you were going to bring it. So that brings me to my next question, which is happiness. And knowing I put a Y, see, I put a Y in there. Knowing I put a Y in there, what does happiness mean to you? And how's that show up in your life today on a daily basis?
I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because I know like we've had a lengthy episode already up until this point. I would say that it's very closely, like my definition of happiness is very closely related to fearlessness, in the sense that it is, for me, the same thing. It is embracing, how do I say this? How much time do we have, Max? How much time do I have to answer this question?
As much time as you need. I always my guess.
All right, I'm gonna share this with you guys. So every human being has, this is axiology, teleology, and a little bit of neuroscience. Okay, every human being has an unconscious set of values that are governing their lives. So when I say values, oftentimes people say like, they think, honesty, integrity, justice, fairness. I'm not talking about those things. Those are social ideals. What I'm talking about in this example is, every day that you and I wake up, Max, there's the things that you value most in your life down to the things that you value so little you don't even think about it. Okay. Right. Now, our values, which again are largely unconscious, here's what's really important, is they dictate how we use our resources. So our resources are time, energy, and money. However we invest our time, energy, and money will ultimately become our destiny. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that you invest your time, energy, and money going in one direction and suddenly wake up way off in, in some other, atmosphere wondering, how did I get here? So however we invest our time, energy, and money becomes our destiny. Well, if we invest our time, energy, and money in direct proportion to our values, then in other words, our values become our destiny. So when we live by our highest values, okay, we experience things like fortitude, clarity, certainty, confidence, diligence, follow through. We feel aligned, fulfilled. Like fulfillment comes from filling full our values. And in the short version of this, the reason that we experience all of those things is because we have inspiration. So the etymology of the word inspiration is from the spirit within. In other words, when we live by our highest values, we are moved by the spirit within. Now, when our goals are in conflict with our values, so oftentimes we have an unconscious set of values. Now, at the same time, we typically have a conscious set of goals, right? Some things that we say that we want to accomplish.
Right.
When our goals are in conflict with our values, we are going to, when we try to pursue those goals, we're going to create symptoms to wake us up to the fact that we're, pursuing something that's in conflict with our values. So some of those symptoms, common symptoms: procrastination, hesitation, frustration, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and the list goes on. Okay. When we pursue goals that are in conflict with our values, because we lack inspiration, we need motivation instead. Motivation means, we need an external force to hold us accountable or pump us up to do the thing that we say that we want to do. So, said differently, when we distill this down, I'm giving you a very short version of this. Like I do a whole hour-long piece on this. When we distill this down, what you begin to see is that when we pursue the things that are most valuable to us in our life, right? The reason we have inspiration, meaning that we're moved from the spirit within. Like think about this. Like there's things there is things in every person's life that it doesn't have to go on their calendar and they'll still remember to do it. They
Right.
don't need an alarm clock. They don't need somebody to tell them to do it. Like Amazon, Jeff Bezos did not need, somebody to wake him up every morning and tell him to stop hitting the snooze buttons because he was going to, you said you were going to go out and build the Amazon store, Jeffy. He didn't have to sit in front of his, YouTube and watch Eric Thomas videos to get pumped up to go build
Right.
the Amazon store. He went and did it because for whatever reason, to some degree or another, consciously or unconsciously, it's filling his soul.
Right.
Oftentimes we live in this world too that tells us that there's some difference between the thing that, like, our vocation and our vacation. Like that there's some sort of dichotomy between spirituality and financial destiny, right? In other words, in order to go make money, like the things that make us money, like there's a difference between that and having a spiritual experience. But the master of life knows no difference. There's a quote by James Michner, and I might bastardize that a little bit here, but it says something to the effect of the master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body. He hardly knows which is which. And so, is it possible that somebody like Warren Buffett is spiritually fulfilled by building Berkshire Hathaway, that Bezos is spiritually fulfilled by building, Amazon, that that Steve Jobs was spiritually fulfilled in his pursuit of Apple? And so for me, happiness is aligning our goals and our values in such a way that that you can tell no difference between our vocation and our vacation.
Right. I love
And
that.
that the way that we fill our bank account is the same as the way we fill our soul. And then we become a master of life. That's happiness.
Well, I love that, right? Because, well, you just talked about the guy from NVIDIA, right? I think there's some spirituality in why his company, right? Like
I believe it.
right? Like Ed Milet, why he so, successful in the thing he started, right? Because he poured into it. He poured into people spiritually. Same with Andy, all the greats. Like, I think, right. And they even talk about it. I think even in their tough times, they kept that first and foremost, right? Like the end result is not about me making a ton of money, but it's about how many people can I help
Mm-hmm.
along the way, right? Which is to me a
Mm-hmm.
great spiritual principle, right? Like I had some friends who got on a call with Ty Lopez, right? And his time
Mm-hmm.
is very valuable and supposed to only go 10 minutes, but I guess they asked such great questions. He's kept it going with them. And it's this med group I belong to. But one thing he said was, if I would have learned, how to pour into people sooner, my success would have came sooner. And basically I'm paraphrasing is what they told me he said. But it was all he realized later. It wasn't about the money. It was like, how many people can I help? Right. And
Right.
it's the same thing with my recovery, right? The only reason that I have almost 22 years clean and sober is I said it on the last podcast and I'll say it again, right? There's a thing in our literature that says when anyone anywhere cries out for help, let the hand of AA be there. And that for that, I'm responsible. Like I get emotional and I get goosebumps thinking about it because me putting my hand out to a new guy that says, I don't know how to do this. And I say, come with me. I'll show you how to do it. Right. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're doing with your biz. Right. And you're expanding people's mind to show them that, look, you're going to go through challenges, but we're going to teach you how to make that brain work in your behalf instead of
Mm-hmm.
against you. Right. So that's why you go as long as you want, but I love that. This has been a freaking awesome time. As you can tell, I got a big smile on my face, but Kiala brought it today. So I'm going to ask you, I know people like me are on the edge of their seat. Like ask them, how do they get a hold of you, Kiala? And how do they work with you if they want to change their mindset and take it to the next level, let's say?
Yeah. I'll give you a couple of resources that to answer that. Number one is if you're one of those people that knows that you are destined for something great in life, and for whatever reason you find yourself coming up against you getting in your own way, check out I have a free assessment. There's a free self-assessment you can take at thepowercode.com. So thepowercode.com, you download a free self-assessment, comes with instructions along with it, and it's 10 questions. Short, simple 10 questions, takes maybe 30 to 45 minutes to complete, but what it's there to help you do is define what your unique set of values are, like I was just talking about. Like, what's the thing that's going to, what creates fulfillment, inspiration, clarity, certainty, purpose, and meaning for you. So that's what's in the self-assessment. On the back end of that self-assessment, there's an optional 2-hour masterclass. We get messages all the time, from people who are like in tears by the time that they finish that 2-hour masterclass. They feel like that alone was a massive breakthrough for them. So you can attend that masterclass. In that masterclass, I give away, the secret to everything that we do. And then at the end, I just say, like, if you want help executing this, here's how to work with us. And so at that point, it's totally optional. It's up to you. No high pressure sales situation or anything like that. If you already like heard enough here and you're like, how do I sign up for this Genesis class? Then Inspirian.com, so that's Inspire, INSPIRAN. So it comes from, I'll just share this really quick, Max, hopefully you don't mind.
I don't mind.
It comes from two words, inspire, which we all know what inspired is, and then Empyrean. In Greek mythology, Empyrean was the highest height of heaven. It was the closest that a mortal could get to the gods. And we're on a mission to inspire people to create their version of heaven. So Inspirian.com, if you go there, you'll learn all about the Genesis class. You can lock in a seat for yourself there, or there's a phone number on the page. You can reach out to my team, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have and make sure that's a good fit for you. Like I said, we offer a double your money back guarantee. So if you don't absolutely feel like it moved the needle for you tremendously, and you're going to get a much greater return than what it costs you to be in the class, then we'll pay you back double what you paid to be there.
Wow. Sounds like an offer you can't refuse, everybody. Hear that? I love it. Man, like I said, great time, Keala. Like, we could probably go for hours and hours.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Thank you for actually, being here and doing me the honor of being a guest, but you're not quite off the hook just yet. I get to ask you my favorite question. I'm sure you've heard it, but it goes like this. What is the one piece of advice, Keala, that you could give my audience to help them grow as human beings and become better people?
Oh yeah, I would go right back to the power code that I just shared with you. Like, take the time to assess and decipher what your unique set of values is, because those values are a window into your soul. And when you discover what that is, you have the opportunity to answer your soul's calling. If there's any single thing that I did, if I look back over all the years and all the tools that I've gained, if there's one single thing out of all the things that I've learned that is most responsible for where I'm at today, it is that concept right there, which I call the power code. And it is deciphering it's axiology. It's deciphering what your unique set of values are. And through that, you get to answer the calling of your soul.
I love it. And you heard him, everybody. Man, you had me on this edge of my seat the whole time. I loved it. We had such a great time. Seriously, but thank you for being here. And I've learned so much, and we may have to bring you back because I'm sure people are going to want to hear some more about what you do currently and get involved, or at least I know I do. So, but you heard him, everybody. If Keala made you think, if he taught you something, if he made you smile, and my famous, if he made you go, I like that, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review so more people could find the podcast. And again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this world. This is Max from the Fearless Happiness Podcast. Until next time.
Are you tired of being weighed down by life's traumas and struggles? Join the Fearless Happiness lifestyle and let us guide you toward a brighter future. Explore our past podcast episodes and get a copy of the Fearless Happiness book to ignite your inner strength. If you or someone you love is battling addiction or facing challenges related to unresolved trauma, know that we are here for you. Visit maxnijst.org, maxnijst.org, and take the first steps toward finding your fearless happiness. Thank you for listening. This has been a production of Fearless Happiness.